On my wedding night, I was taken hostage by a rich young lord who dismissed the existence of spirits and deities. He knelt by the surgery room door, praying fervently for a safe delivery for his beloved. For more than a week, the kidnapper repeatedly called him, but all his calls went unanswered. After I was freed, journalists inquired, "Miss Sophia, what are your thoughts on Noah kneeling and praying for you?" I simply hope they both enjoy a lifetime of joy and never separate. It was during my wedding night that I was abducted by Noah's rival. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a deserted warehouse with a scarred man standing beside me. He held a knife to my throat and declared, "Miss Sophia, as long as Noah is prepared to trade that land in North City for you, I will release you." The North City land was highly sought after, and due to a misunderstanding, it came into our possession. To appease Noah, my family handed it over in exchange for some resources. Although the land held little worth initially, it now had the power to save my life. The kidnapper gave me a phone and said, "Sophia, I hope you act sensibly and don't complicate things for me." My hands shook as I dialed a familiar number, but no one answered, and my heart sank. He suddenly grinned and taunted, "Sophia, are you trying to deceive me? Do you think I'm a child?" The kidnapper believed I was stalling for time. I had dialed incorrectly, but those numbers were burned into my memory. Through tears, I begged, "I'm not lying, please give me more time." My repeated calls went unanswered and diverted to voicemail. At that moment, I realized Noah didn't want to answer my calls. He always thought I was being deceitful, forcing himself to marry me despite never liking me, perhaps even despising me. The kidnapper bound me tightly and began using a bamboo stick to rip at my fingernails. Since my mother's death when I was 3, I had been abandoned by everyone. My maternal relatives considered me cursed, blaming me for my mother's demise and forbidding me from entering their home. My stepmother neglected me, keeping me locked in the basement without knowing day from night, sometimes even forgetting to feed me. At 18, they arranged my marriage to Noah as if I were a mere possession for their family. In this world, no one cared about me. Even if I had perished, perhaps no one would have noticed. Maybe that was my destiny. Trapped, unable to tell day from night, the kidnapper lifted me, dunked me into a barrel, and I felt myself suffocating. He then whipped me, the pain so excruciating that I couldn't breathe. He insisted I contact Noah despite my countless pleas, never relenting. Lately, no matter how often I called Noah, his phone stayed off. The kidnapper sent images of my suffering to his email, yet he remained indifferent. Was I truly so unimportant to Noah? The kidnappers were in disbelief. I opened my eyes and chuckled softly. "Yes, since that's the case, please let Sophia join me in my burial," I whispered, closing my eyes and calmly awaiting my fate. Before the pain could reach me, I heard the sound of the door breaking down. The kidnapper holding the knife was swiftly killed. He was dead, and we never discovered who was responsible for his demise. I wanted answers and urged the police to investigate further, but Noah and my family tried to deter me, advising me to stay silent because wealthy families couldn't tolerate gossip or scandal. Listening to them, I chuckled softly with tears streaming down my face. My heart felt crushed, struggling to breathe. Noah's mother looked at me and whispered, "Sophia, rest peacefully. Mom will visit you tonight." Her voice was calm and gentle. If she hadn't urged me to find Noah, maybe I wouldn't have been kidnapped at all. They came and went, and at that moment I saw Noah's image on the television screen, kneeling before an operating room as if praying for someone. It was the day I was kidnapped. All I could hear was a constant buzzing in my head. Everyone said Noah's first love was staying in that hospital. They had witnessed everything, discussing how devoted Noah was, willing to do anything for his first love, even sacrifice his life without hesitation. But as his wife, kidnapped and unable to reach him, I felt isolated. I rode the elevator to the top floor and emerged to see Noah holding a child, whispering sweet nothings to the child as if it were a treasure. Then Nancy arrived slowly. Noah gently asked, "Why are you here? Is there still any pain?" They stood together like a perfect couple. If this man weren't my husband, I might have thought they were well suited. I approached them, confronting them directly. Noah noticed me, his brows knitted as he handed the child to Nancy, then grabbed my wrist and pulled me into a stairwell. The pain was unbearable, tears streaming down my face. He scolded me, "Sophia, why are you causing a scene now?" My heart felt like it was pierced by countless needles, the pain intense. After a moment, I found my voice. "Noah, why did you turn off your phone? You've been calling me nonstop. It's been so frustrating." His tone was impatient, but to me it felt like a poisoned dagger to my heart. I looked down and let out a mocking laugh. When he saw my bandaged hand, he realized I was hurt. He looked directly at me and softly asked, "How did this happen?" I met his gaze and slowly replied, "I was attacked by your enemies. They nearly killed me by tearing off my fingernails." He stood there, eyes wide with shock, unable to respond. But it didn't matter anymore. I softly said, "I'm walking past you, step by step, going downstairs, feeling as if countless needles were stabbing my feet. It hurt so much. Tears blurred my vision, nearly making me stumble down the stairs. Noah was no longer the same as he was in our childhood. He would never be the boy who, at 12, ran into me in the basement, hugged me, and said, "Sophia, don't be afraid. I'll take you away." He wouldn't defend me when others bullied me, telling them, "Try touching Sophia and see what happens." Back then, he was my hero, but to him, I might have become a burden long ago, possibly disrupting his normal life. I lowered my eyes, smiled, and felt sarcasm spreading within me. In that instant, all my worries seemed insignificant. Watching his figure walk into the room, I closed my eyes. He sat on a chair and asked, "Does it hurt, Noah?" I responded, "I'm not in pain. Let's get a divorce." At that moment, I felt incredibly calm, devoid of emotional turmoil. Noah didn't respond with words, but offered me an apple instead. I opened my eyes to meet his dark gaze, and he said, "If you love Nancy so much, you shouldn't have married me, Sophia. I owe her." "I can't just ignore her," I heard him say, which made me burst into laughter. Sarcasm filled my voice, tears welling up and sliding down my cheeks. At that moment, my heart felt numb. "Noah, please leave. I don't want to see you," I said. "Okay," he replied softly, placing the sliced apple on a plate. "Rest well. I'll come to see you later." Only when I heard the door close did I finally exhale in relief. For years, I had warned myself not to follow my mother's path. Marrying Noah was not a favorable outcome, but there was no other option for me. It was my only choice. I had considered running away, only to be caught and imprisoned. All my electronic devices confiscated. I was released only on the wedding day. Noah had no choice but to marry me if he wanted to inherit his family's wealth. We were both puppets being controlled. The day before the wedding, I still believed I liked Noah, thinking that as long as he treated me well, even without love, we could live respectfully together. He would cook, I would care for the flowers, and perhaps we could raise a child. He could have been a good father, but that was merely a fantasy. When I went to the pharmacy for medication, I encountered Nancy, who had just been discharged. Noah was holding a child and gently advising Nancy to be cautious. The affection in his eyes was about to overflow. But during the few days I spent there, he always prioritized Nancy, occasionally bringing me a meal. I lowered my gaze, laughed softly, and thought to myself. I picked up the medication from the window, and as I passed by Nancy, she stopped abruptly, turned back, and hesitantly called out, "Sophia." I paused, composed my emotions, and responded, "Yes." Before I could say anything else, she was already in tears, looking pitiable. But I felt even more sorry for her. My husband spent all his time by her side, completely ignoring me. Seeing her like that, I asked, "What's wrong, Nancy? I'll give you everything, including Noah, if that's what you want." I took a few steps forward, locking eyes with her and stubbornly waiting for her response. But before I could continue, tears streamed down her cheeks. She appeared utterly distressed, but my own sorrow deepened knowing my husband was always by her side. He never parted from her, while I remained unyain. Observing her weeping, I approached with a gentle smile and asked, "Nancy, what's wrong? I can provide you with anything. Why are you still crying?" Unexpectedly, Noah seized my wrist, pulled me close, and sternly murmured, "That's enough, Sophia." Despite being aware of my injured hand and the surrounding crowd, I resisted becoming a subject of ridicule. I glanced up at Noah and let out a foolish laugh before looking at the child he was holding and then at Nancy. The child is lovely, but they don't resemble you. Noah treats you so well that anyone would assume the child is yours, I said loudly enough for others to overhear, causing whispers to spread and the crowd to grow. I decided to leave the area of gossip and return to the hospital room. The media soon caught wind of what happened and swarmed around my room, the external noise resonating in my ears. Noah attempted to manage the situation by calling someone to handle it and tried to dismiss them. I opened the door and invited them in. They entered, and I looked down at my bandaged hand, offering a faint smile. "I won't bother you with greetings," I remarked. However, someone inquired, "Miss Sophia, what are your thoughts on Noah praying for Mike's wife to marry him, wishing them a happy union?" Perhaps my response was startling, as silence filled the room. Everyone knew Noah and I had recently married, and Nancy was also married. It seemed like an attempt to humiliate me. I then added, "If they truly love each other, I wish them a long and joyful life together, never to part." On the day I was discharged, I went back to our new home. The door and elevator still displayed celebratory decorations, but I found them utterly absurd. A new couple without genuine love, despite many blessings, didn't feel festive to me. I contemplated divorce, but both our families took turns persuading me to stay, arguing that divorce would be detrimental to both sides. My father even threatened repercussions if my grandfather discovered it. Fortunately, Noah was away for a while. Without dealing with Noah, I cherished my freedom. I would leisurely make a cup of coffee and sip it slowly, laughing aloud at funny moments on TV. Suddenly, I heard the door open and saw Noah before I could turn or react. He had already walked in and approached me. "Sophia, I brought you dessert," he said, placing a chocolate cake, a favorite from my childhood, in front of me. When I lived with Noah, his grandfather would specially buy it for me, but this time it tasted bitter, not sweet at all. I closed the box and tossed it into the trash. "I don't want it," I declared, turning to return to my room. Instantly, Noah's voice stopped me. "Sophia, I promised my grandfather I would marry you. I will treat you well." He packed the cake box and refused to visit Nancy anymore. Lowering his eyes, he gathered his belongings, including the takeout I had ordered, and discarded them. He retrieved some ingredients from the fridge and headed to the kitchen. I hadn't seen him cook in years. When he was younger, he had to sneak downstairs at night to prepare food because his family didn't permit him to eat fast food. Once, I caught him just as he was about to speak, and he quickly covered my mouth. "I'll share half with you when it's ready," he had said. I had smiled and agreed. He was only 18 then, but he was exceptionally kind to me. Reflecting back, our feelings were likely just familial, as our families were close, and I had stayed with Noah's family for a time. He had watched me grow up, and although there shouldn't have been romantic feelings, a seed had been planted in my heart, slowly growing. I had always considered attending the same university as Noah, following him, and staying by his side. Unfortunately, reality often falls short. If you dislike something, you simply don't, and it can never be altered. Life had to continue. To please me, Noah returned home on time each night. Breakfast was ready on the table each morning, and he even had luxurious gifts sent to me. Seeing these presents being brought in made me chuckle, but we still treated each other with respect in public, feigning affection while not speaking a word at home or sharing a bedroom. However, neither of us ever discussed divorce again. On my birthday, Noah organized a celebration for me. He accompanied me to the venue and put on a wonderful performance. Everyone admired me, commenting on how fortunate I was. Listening to the conversations below, I turned to look at Noah as the clock struck 11. His phone rang, and I heard Nancy's tearful voice on the other end. "Noah, the child has a fever, and there's no one at home. I'm so scared," she said clearly. Noah glanced at me, his eyes filled with hesitation that felt like a sharp knife piercing me. I realized he wanted to leave. I looked up at him. "Noah, you promised not to see Nancy again." He embraced me and whispered only for us to hear, "Sophia, I'll take them to the hospital and return to cut the cake with you." Without a moment's hesitation, he asked the maid to help with his coat, put it on, and left without delay, abandoning me once more. I grabbed his sleeve and looked up at him. "Noah, that's not your child." He looked down, avoiding my gaze. "Sophia, don't be unreasonable. he replied. I smiled, lowered my head, released his sleeve, and softly said, Noah, if you leave today, we will get a divorce. Taking a step back, I thought I might frighten him, but he departed without a second thought, making me the subject of ridicule in the room. It was meant to be my birthday celebration, but my husband left me again for someone else. Noah didn't return to share the cake, and people continued gossiping around me. They claimed it was all for show, some saying Noah never loved me and only married me because of his grandfather's wishes. They weren't entirely wrong. I went to collect my clothes from the hall and was about to leave the house. My grandfather sat in a wheelchair, looking up at me. Sophia, you must visit me often in the future. All right, I promise, I responded as I left Noah's house. As I walked out, it began to rain. The raindrops fell on me, but I didn't feel cold. I moved forward step by step, enduring a sharp pain in my heart. I walked 10 kilometers and then returned. My feet were blistered and sore, but the night saw me sleepless. The day before, Noah had said he would cook noodles for me, but by morning he still hadn't returned. At that moment, the small hope in my heart was completely shattered. I washed my face in the bathroom to wake myself up a bit, then packed my luggage in the bedroom. My marriage to Noah ended there. As I was leaving, I encountered Noah on his way back. He stared at me blankly, his eyes filled with curiosity. I glanced at him briefly, attempting to pass by, but he grabbed my suitcase. Where are you going, Noah? Let's get a divorce, I said softly. Sophia, when we got married, he began, but I interrupted him. Noah, I'll say it again. If you don't love me, you shouldn't have married me. Honestly, I didn't marry you willingly either, but I couldn't resist. Our marriage is a shackle for both of us. I pushed his hand away and pressed the elevator button. As I stepped into the elevator, he stared at me intensely, his eyes reddening with barely contained emotions. It seemed absurd. It wasn't until I entered the taxi that I realized I, someone born and raised in this city, never truly had a place to call home. I found a nearby hotel and settled in. During these days, I hired a lawyer to draft a divorce agreement and sent it to Noah. He messaged me, Sophia, stop messing around. We can't get a divorce. I promise you I won't see Nancy again in the future. But I didn't believe him. His promises were empty. He didn't come to find me, so I decided to seek him out. When I went to his company to find Noah, the secretary informed me he was at the meeting hall, efficiently managing the venue and directing his subordinates. I had never seen him like this before. Even in this state, he had never truly belonged to me. Through the crowd, our eyes met from a distance. Upon seeing me, his face brightened with joy as he looked toward me from afar. He was still the same Noah as before, yet everything about him seemed different. Sophia, come to the conference room, he called. I shadowed him closely as he gently shut the door behind us. Noah, I've come to hand you the divorce papers, I announced. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out the documents and handed them over, noticing there wasn't a pen on his desk. I then searched my bag and found a pen to offer him. The moment he saw it, his pupils narrowed and he nervously took it from my hand. Looking into my eyes, he asked, Sophia, do we really have to go through with this? Seeing his unease, I chuckled lightly and responded, Noah, I'm not worthless and neither are my feelings. With the first earnings from my part-time job, I bought you a pen. You gave it to Nancy because she liked it, and she threw it away. By coincidence, I found it near the trash can while taking out the garbage and decided to retrieve it. Ever since we got engaged when I turned 18, you've never truly looked at me. You've directed all your frustrations towards me. Sophia, how could I? His words were cut off as I interjected, but you have to admit, you don't care about me because even answering my calls seems to annoy you. I stared at him, tears welling up in my eyes. I don't know who you love, but I know you don't love me. You just don't want to leave. It's just that you can't explain it to your family. Observing my determination, he opened the divorce papers and signed his name in the designated spot, though his handwriting was somewhat uneven. Looking up, I noticed his eyes were slightly red, indicating reluctance. Seeing him like that, I couldn't help but laugh. I placed the agreement back in my bag and looked at him. Meet me at the hotel on the day of the divorce to pick me up, he agreed. When Noah arrived to collect me that day, there was a scene of chaos. Numerous reporters were gathered outside the hotel, eager to capture the latest scoop, as everyone was interested in the scandal involving a prominent family. I went straight to the underground parking area, took the elevator, and entered Noah's car. During the drive, he asked again, "Is our marriage truly beyond repair?" "Yes, it is irreparable," I replied. He fell silent but sighed deeply. He seemed to regret the marriage, reminiscent of the day I saved him. Snow began to fall gracefully from the sky. I used to think snow in the northern city was insignificant, but today's snowfall was remarkable. Still, he didn't believe I was the one who wrapped him in the cotton jacket. He never accepted that I saved him. After graduating from high school, we decided to celebrate our graduation on a mountain in the suburbs. My stepmother didn't arrange a car for me that night. A classmate offered me a ride down, and when I tried to hail a taxi alone, I found the road blocked and had to walk. A car sped past me, almost hitting me before I could understand why it was on a closed road. I saw a bloodied figure lying in the snow, blood slowly seeping from beneath him. The car had hit someone and fled. Only when I saw clearly did I realize it was Noah. I removed my cotton jacket, draped it over him, and called for an ambulance, which had to detour to reach us. Even as I kept calling his name, he was barely breathing, close to unconsciousness. Tears streamed down my face as I assured him, "Noah, don't be scared. I'll find help by stopping a car on the road. Please hold on." But when I returned, Noah had vanished into the snow. Wearing light clothes, I couldn't locate him despite searching for a long time until I saw my classmate Lucas from afar. He reached out and helped me up, asking, "Sophia, did you dress too lightly? Are you cold?" I was anxiously spinning, teary-eyed, and looked at Lucas. "Did you see Noah? He was just there." Seeing him standing still, I grabbed Lucas's arm. "Can you help me find him?" I pleaded. "Let's go home," he responded instead of taking me back immediately. Lucas took me to his rented house. I had a high fever and couldn't wake up no matter how hard I tried. In my dreams, I saw myself and Noah for several days, only hearing voices without being able to open my eyes. Later, I discovered that someone had saved Noah, but whenever I inquired, everyone claimed it was Nancy. I attempted to tell everyone it was me, but they thought I was joking. Only the heavens, the earth, and I knew the truth. No one else believed me. Even though I told Noah countless times, he just said, "Sophia, stop messing around." The divorce is finalized, our marriage is over. I was about to say something to Noah when I saw a familiar figure. It was Lucas. He walked by and punched Noah in the face. "Noah, Sophia nearly froze to death on the road trying to save you." Lucas's words cut through like a sharp blade, piercing my heart and making it hard to breathe. Noah looked at me, then at Lucas. Shaking his head, he said, "It's impossible. The first thing I saw upon waking was Nancy. It was you, Sophia, who called the ambulance and wrapped your own coat around him. You had a fever and had been ill for days." I lowered my eyes. But Noah approached me and asked if what Lucas said was true or false. I smiled, and Noah simply encouraged me to believe in myself. Lucas stepped forward as if he was about to do something. I stood before him and told Noah, "If you and Nancy end up together in the future, I wish you both a lifetime of happiness." Noah remained motionless, and I grabbed Lucas's sleeve and entered the car first. Sitting in the passenger seat, I watched Noah drive further away until he vanished from sight. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably, and at that moment my hand throbbed with intense pain. Lucas turned to me softly and asked, "Is it hurting?" "Lucas, my hand hurts so much," I replied. "It really hurts," he affirmed. Lucas pulled the car over to the roadside and embraced me. He simply waited for my emotions to settle without uttering a word. Those days, my tense emotions suddenly eased. The walls around my heart crumbled all at once. Lucas leaned onto my shoulder and whispered gently, "Sophia, don't be afraid. I'm here." His voice was soothing, like a sedative, calming me entirely. The phone in my bag buzzed, and Lucas took it from me, handing it to me. On the other end was my father's irritable voice. "Sophia, hurry back now or else. Don't blame me for not sending someone to bring you back." I knew the news had spread rapidly. My family was also aware. We rode in silence as he dropped me off at home. At the door, he stubbornly refused to unlock it, looking worried. "Don't worry, nothing will happen," I said softly. He lowered his gaze and stared out the window, saying quietly, I'll be waiting outside for you. If anything happens, remember to call me." I nodded, smiled at him, grabbed my bag, and exited the car. As I pushed open the door, I saw many relatives I hadn't seen in years, both from my maternal and paternal grandfather's sides, all gathered because of my wedding, which was ironic. "Sophia, kneel down," my grandfather's voice echoed as I entered, and everyone turned to look at me. My stepmother and my so-called stepsister were there, observing the unfolding drama. I looked up at my grandfather and asked, "Why should I kneel? You privately called off the engagement, betraying the family. Do any of you truly care about me? I was dragged away, but you were too ashamed to bring me back. My mother died in the bathroom because of his affair." "What did you say at the time?" The room fell silent as no one responded to my accusations. I lowered my gaze and continued. "You said it was her destiny to be injured and unable to bear a son, which is why my father had an affair. Even you, grandfather, said that in our family we must turn a blind eye to survive." Memories flooded back. That year, my mother slashed her wrist, turning the bathtub water crimson, staining her white t-shirt bright red. At 3 years old, I didn't understand why. I just wanted to find something to stop her bleeding quickly, but I couldn't do anything as I watched her life fade away bit by bit. I cried, running downstairs, but found no one to help. Later, I learned that all the house staff were on leave. My father didn't return because my mother was too controlling. In her final moments, she grabbed my hand and said, "Sophia, when you grow up, you must leave this house." As I grew up, I ran away many times, only to be brought back each time. Everyone told me that in a family like ours, we couldn't choose freely. Marriage or work, everything was arranged by the family. We had to accept our destiny. I looked around and declared, "All of you are murderers. You all are responsible for my mother's death." Before I could finish, my father kicked me in the legs pit, causing me to kneel on the ground. I was held down, and no matter how I struggled, I couldn't rise. The whip struck me repeatedly, spreading pain bit by bit. My stepsister laughed mockingly, a faint smile on her face, as if I deserved it. I gazed at her and said, "Amy, what I'm experiencing today will be your reality tomorrow." "You might be mocking me, but in reality, you're also mocking yourself. In families like ours, everyone becomes a scapegoat for others' interests." The voice reverberated through the corridor. At that instant, I noticed Lucas. He stood before me, removed his jacket, and wrapped it around me. Placing my hand on his wrist, I slowly rose and addressed those nearby. "Grandfather, the downfall of our group isn't my fault and has nothing to do with me. From this point forward, I wish to sever all ties with this family. Over the years, the group has largely fallen under my father's control, and they intended to use me to appease Noah, hoping to secure resources for our family. While they exploited me, they also labeled me an outsider. As I tried to leave, someone obstructed my path." Lucas lifted me up, glanced around, and said, "Grandfather, don't escalate this. I just saw—" My grandfather raised his hand, allowing me to be free. The moment I stepped outside, I felt a wave of relief, no longer needing to depend on anyone. Lucas, once my protector, took me to his apartment to tend to my injuries. Now a prominent figure in the northern city, he was sought after by many. He offered me a place to rest in his living room, assuring me that I could ask for anything if needed. Watching him walk away, I closed my eyes. Everything suddenly clear. My mother hadn't abandoned me empty-handed. She had established a charity that brought Lucas into my life. She had asked him to stay with me until I turned 18 and then send him abroad for his studies. When I turned 18 and became engaged to Noah, Lucas departed overseas. One evening, I stepped outside in my slippers and noticed Lucas. "How long have you been back?" I asked. He looked up and replied, "Are you going to ask me how I found out about your divorce?" I nodded. By chance, he stood to get me a glass of water from the kitchen and handed it over gently. "I'm sorry I returned late." I shook my head. "It's not your fault. It's my destiny." Lucas remained unchanged, just as he was years ago. During the day, he cared for me, balancing work and finding classic movies for me to watch. We kept to ourselves. He didn't ask questions, and I remained silent. Once my wounds healed, I found a place to live and prepared to move out. As I was leaving, Noah was waiting for me downstairs at Lucas's place. When he saw me approaching, he greeted me from a distance. "I'll help you," he said, though it wasn't necessary. I responded, "Lucas," who glanced at Noah, grabbed my suitcase, and whispered, "I'll meet you in the car." I pushed Noah's hand away, intending to pass by him, but I heard Noah call out, "Sophia, I don't know what's happening in your family." I stopped and turned to him, whispering, "Even if you knew, what difference would it make? Take you away." He replied instinctively, but I couldn't help but laugh softly. "Noah, can you truly distinguish between love and gratitude?" He continued, "I owe Nancy, which is why I treated her well." But deep down, he harbored resentment. He had envisioned a future with her, but I became an obstacle as his family forced our relationship, making him uncomfortable. However, it was Nancy who saved him, leading him to fall for her. In the end, he loved himself more than her. I looked into his eyes and whispered, "Noah, you need to understand the difference between love and gratitude." Before he could answer, I walked ahead. He grabbed my wrist, and I turned to face him. Seeing his reddened eyes, he looked down and softly chuckled. "We have nothing. I liked you, but it was just a passing feeling." He pushed his hand away, got into his car, and I watched his shadow fade in the rearview mirror. Lucas glanced at me, smiling more deeply. "What are you laughing at?" I asked. "Sophia, don't look back. The past is a dead end, but the future awaits. Without family constraints, things will improve once you cut ties with them," he advised. Noah had sent me some money, which I accepted. It was something I deserved, considering everything I had endured with him. Over the past year, there had been no rewards, only hard work. Noah began investigating the incident where he was hit by a car, and I was kidnapped. The investigation pointed to Nancy. It turned out Nancy had orchestrated the attack on Noah and then sent someone to rescue him without leaving evidence. Noah's family tried to cover it up to avoid a scandal, which is why Nancy acted so recklessly. Earlier, Noah's father had given Nancy resources out of gratitude, but he strongly opposed a marriage between Noah and Nancy. Feeling cornered, Nancy found someone else and married Mike, a man who had been disabled since childhood and had a violent temper. Mike often broke things and was abusive toward Nancy because she had saved him. Noah was always kind to her, helping her with her divorce and supporting her during childbirth. Nancy had sought land, leading her to send someone to tie me up. She even wanted to kill me, seeing me as a barrier between her and Noah. When Noah discovered all this, he stopped supporting Nancy and pressured her. Eventually, the head of Nancy's family was jailed, and their group went bankrupt. As Lucas browsed through the gossip, I chuckled softly, closed the book, and pointed to the files on his desk. "Lucas, why are you so interested in reading gossip all of a sudden?" "Sophia, if Noah asked you to come back, would you—" Before he could finish, I laughed and interrupted him. "Noah wouldn't ask me to return. He never forces anyone." He hugged me, resting his chin on my head, and whispered, "Let's get married." Before I could decline, he said, "I'll take you away from the northern city." For the past 2 years, Lucas had been helping me with personal issues, and we even tried dating. However, I never considered marriage. It wasn't fair for him to sacrifice so much of his career for me. "Lucas, I don't want what you've given up for me to create a barrier between us." I rose from his embrace, looked down at him, and said, "Actually, this is fine as it is." Lucas got up, hugged me, and seemed lost in his thoughts. That year, I visited Noah's grandfather. Noah's father informed me that Grandpa was waiting in the study. Upon entering, he asked Noah to leave. Sitting across from him, Grandpa said, "Sophia, I'm sorry things turned out this way." "No, it's my fault," I replied softly, hanging my head. "I couldn't break free from my family, which led to this outcome. But Grandpa, I'll never forget the kindness you showed me when Noah carried me out of the basement years ago. It brought me here." Grandpa responded, "This house is your home. Stay as long as you want." I remained for a year until my family came to bring me back. Without Grandpa's support, I don't know how much I would have suffered. As I was leaving, Noah stood at the door, looking at me intently, and began to speak. "Sophia, if you ever—" Before he could finish, I interrupted. "Noah, I hold a grudge against you and will never forgive you. I hope to never see you again in my lifetime." Seeing me dressed simply, Lucas approached and pulled me into his arms. That year, we watched fireworks together and left the northern city. "I have no regrets," he said. Later, we traveled to numerous places, experiencing countless new environments where no one knew us. We opened a small bar and continued to move forward, never looking back. The events of those years became part of the past. I am just one of the many souls in this world. Year after year, Lucas and I watched fireworks from the mountain. That moment felt eternal, and every year we continued this tradition.